Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Thank you so much for watching. This video is going to be my updated 2026 US Senate map prediction for the month of August, coming out the first few days of August. Now the 2026 Senate elections consist of the usual 33 Senate seats plus 2 Senate seats which are special elections based off the incumbents being appointed to President Trump's administration. These 2 Senate races are in Ohio and Florida, where Florida is now Republican Senator Ashley Moody, who was previously Senator Marco Rubio. Now Rubio being President Trump's Secretary of State, Ashley Moody got appointed to that role. And in Ohio, this was Senator J.D. Vance. Obviously, J.D. Vance became the Vice President of the United States, and this is now former Lieutenant Governor, now Senator John Husted. So there are 35 Senate races up in 2026. Right now, before giving any seats to the Democrats and Republicans, Democrats currently start out with a 3-seat majority, Democrats having 34 Senate seats, Republicans having 31. However, this map that's up in 2026 is more of a Republican-leaning Senate map compared to the other 2 Senate maps that are up and going to be in 2028 and 2030. I would argue this is the most Republican-leaning of the 3 Senate maps. Now, my predictions for this for these races are going to go as follows. The dark red blue color, like this color right here for the Democrats and this color right here for the Republicans, this indicates a safe Republican win. This is going to be a 15% margin of victory or more in the respective races. This lighter red and lighter blue, but still pretty dark, this is likely. This is a margin of victory which falls in between 15% and 5%. That is in the likely category. The light blue and the light red color, this is a lean rating. This is going to fall between 5% and 1% rating. And the very light blue and the very light red, this is the tilt rating. This is anything that I think will be decided by less than 1% of the vote. So with that said, we have a lot of Senate races to go over. I'm just going to go quickly through some of the states that I view as safe as this time. Not going to go really too much in depth on these because there's not going to be really any competition here. In Oregon, it's going to be a safe win for the Democrats, as well as I expect the state of Illinois will also be a safe Democratic win. The state of Colorado, I do believe this will also be a safe Democratic win for John Hickenlooper. The state of Delaware, I expect to be safe. New Jersey, even though it was closer in 2024, I think Cory Booker will win again by a safe margin. Rhode Island will be safe, and Massachusetts, I also expect, will be safe. Virginia has the potential to be under 15%. It is Mark Warner, the Democratic senator. If he were to face off against Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, it could become more of a competitive race. But for now, I would start it out in the safe Democratic category. This puts the Democrats up to 42 Senate seats in the safe column. Now, the Republicans, for their safe states, they do have a lot more safe states in this election. In Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alaska for now, unless Mary Peltola, the former Democratic representative, decides to run for Senate. If that were to happen, I would change the rating to likely Republicans starting off. But for now, I expect Alaska to start out as safe Republican. Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina with Lindsey Graham also could get a little bit more competitive, but I think it would be a safe Republican win. Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia, all of which are safe for the Republicans. Florida is right around the edge between being a safe Republican state and being a likely Republican state, but I do think Ashley Moody right now starts out by winning it by more than 15%. So after the safe states given to the respective parties, this puts the Republicans at 47 seats, Democrats are at 42. So after all the safe states, the Republicans have about a 5-seat advantage on the Senate map so far. However, we do have a handful of likely seats to go over on this map. The first I'm going to do is likely Democratic, and this is going to be the state of New Mexico. I currently have this being a likely Democratic win. The last Senate election in 2020 for this race was Democrat Ben Ray Lujan, who won by 6.1%. However, we did see a Senate race in 2024 where Martin Heinrich, the other Democrat, won by 10.1%. I think it's more likely we see something similar to the 2024 result, around a 10-point win for the Democrat in that race. We also have the state of Minnesota, where Minnesota, it was a lean state in the presidential level. Oh, sorry, that's the Senate map. We'll pull up the election results here. At the Senate level, it was a safe Democratic state for Amy Klobuchar, 15.7% safe, and that Republican Royce White is running again in 2026. I expect he'll be the Republican nominee for now, unless someone else steps up to run. This other Senate seat in Minnesota back in 2020 was a 5.2% win for the Democrat, which was very narrowly in the likely Democratic category. Now, it is an open race. The Democrat, Tina Smith, is not running again, but I do think whoever the Democrats end up nominating, whether it's going to be Peggy Flanagan or Angie Craig, the lieutenant governor and U.S. representative of Minnesota, I think both of them would win by more than 5%, but under 15% in this race. That puts the Democrats up to 44, and that's going to be it for the likely Democratic races at this time. Now, we do have a handful of states that are going to be likely wins, in my opinion, for the Republicans. Starting with the state of Iowa with Joni Ernst. As of right now, I do believe she is expressed interest in running for re-election. She has not officially said if she is going to. That could potentially throw a wrench in this ranking, but for now, I think she starts out in the likely Republican category if she does run for re-election. She won by likely Republican margins back in 2020, though 6.5% is still relatively pretty competitive. The last Senate election in Iowa we saw was Chuck Grassley's 12-point win in 2022. I think Ernst is certainly less popular than Grassley, so if she were to run, I think it would be more of a competitive race, but I do think Ernst would start out in the likely Republican category. The state of Nebraska is an interesting one. It's more of a reliable red state, but independent Dan Osborne is running again for Senate after he ran a very close race against Republican Deb Fischer in 2024, only losing by 6.7%. This time around, he's running against Republican Pete Ricketts, who was the former governor of Nebraska. Ricketts, I would argue, is a stronger Republican candidate than Deb Fischer is. However, I do think Dan Osborne should also not be taken lightly, though, given his strong performance in the last election. So I think Nebraska will remain under 15% margin of victory, but I do think the Republicans are still favored to win the Senate race in the state of Nebraska. That puts Republicans up to 49. Next, we have the state of Ohio. Ohio is a very interesting state because this is really contingent on what former Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown decides to do. In the state of Ohio, we just saw a Senate election in 2024 where the Republican Bernie Moreno defeated Sherrod Brown, who at the time was the Democratic incumbent, by roughly 3.6%. Whereas back in 2022, we saw J.D. Vance defeat Democrat Tim Ryan by 6.1%. Right now, without Sherrod Brown in the race, I am giving it to the Republicans in the likely Republican category. If Sherrod Brown were to enter this race, I would move the ranking down to lean Republican out of respect of Sherrod Brown and the strong performance he had in 2024. I do still think the Republicans would be favored in this race, given how much Ohio has moved to the Republican direction in recent years, but I do think Ohio could become competitive if Sherrod Brown does decide to run. So that puts the Republicans up to 50. They do have technically the majority with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking the tie, but we do have one more likely state remaining, and that is the state of Texas. And Texas is very fascinating here because there's a very competitive primary underway between Republican Senator John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton. And how that plays out is going to make a very big difference in the election ratings for this race. As the early polling shows, Ken Paxton polls a lot weaker in polling than John Cornyn does. I think it starts out as likely Republican right now for both candidates, but I think Ken Paxton will be right around that 5% margin, where John Cornyn would be more likely to win by about 7 or 8% on that regard. Texas voted for Ted Cruz by 8.5%. I don't think John Cornyn would do any worse than this if he is the Republican nominee, whereas Ken Paxton, I would expect to do worse on this side of things. The Democrats do have, I believe, Colin Allred running again, and there could be some more Democrats that jump into that race as well. But for now, the Republicans get 51 Senate seats, Democrats 44. Now we have 5 seats remaining, and I do expect all 5 of these Senate races to be decided by under 5% of the vote. And I'm going to start in the lean category. The only lean Democrat, or the first lean Democratic state I'll say actually right now, is the Senate seat in the state of New Hampshire. I currently have that one as lean Democratic. This is Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen. She is not running again for re-election. It's an open race. It's going to be Democrat Representative Chris Pappas facing off against former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown, who I think Pappas and Brown are both very formidable candidates in their own right. And I do think this is going to be kind of a under-the-radar, very competitive Senate race that likely won't get a lot of media attention compared to some of the others like Georgia or North Carolina or Michigan. But I do think New Hampshire could be a very competitive election, and I think Scott Brown is a strong Republican candidate that will be able to get a lot of the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, but also some independent voters as well, like he did in his prior Senate race that he ran in New Hampshire back in 2014, where he only lost to Jeanne Shaheen by about 3.2%. And when he ran for re-election in Massachusetts as the incumbent, he only lost to Elizabeth Warren by 7.5% in the very safe Democratic state of Massachusetts. So I do think Scott Brown is a very formidable opponent, while at the same time recognizing that Chris Pappas is also a very strong candidate in his own right, having won his House seats by likely Democratic margins in every single election that he has been in. So I think it's two very strong political candidates going at it, and I think it's going to be a very fascinating race to watch for in New Hampshire to see how that plays out. But New Hampshire I have starting out in the lean Democratic category. Next, we have the state of Maine, which I currently have starting out in the lean Republican category. And this race is going to be very fascinating, where this is Republican Susan Collins. She's the only Republican senator representing a state that Kamala Harris won in 2024. So naturally, she is going to be a top target of the Democrats in trying to flip this seat. She also has played a very critical role in either voting for President Trump's agenda or voting against a lot of President Trump's agenda as well. So she plays a very important swing vote in the U.S. Senate, and I'm sure Democrats would love to take her down. The Democrats' problem right now is there's currently not a top-tier, well-known Democratic candidate in the race for Maine at this point, though Democratic Governor Janet Mills is reportedly expressing interest in potentially running. That would give the Democrats a stronger chance in this race. For now, I'm starting it off, though, as a lean Republican. If Mills were to enter it, I think it would still be very close. I would move it down to tilt Republican because I'm kind of taking a more cautious approach on Maine, as Susan Collins was losing in the polls going into 2020, but did end up winning by a likely Republican margin. But that's going to be an interesting Senate race to watch for there. That puts the Republican up to 52, Democrats 45. Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia are currently the three Senate seats right now that I do have consistently in the no rating battleground category. New Hampshire and Maine at this point in time are just outside of that ranking. But for now, Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia are the ones I'm watching. Michigan right now is Republican Representative Mike Rogers. He'll be the Republican nominee again in all likelihood. The Democrats have a competitive primary underway there with Mallory McMorrow, Abdul El Sayed, and Representative Haley Stevens running in that Democratic primary, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. The early polling data suggests Haley Stevens has a very slight lead in both the Democratic primary and against Republican Representative Mike Rogers, while Rogers does better against El Sayed and McMorrow than he does against Stevens. I expect this race to be very, very close. Michigan had a very close Senate race back in 2024, just a few months ago now, where Democrat Lisa Slotkin defeated Mike Rogers by only 0.34%. So it was a very close race. While at the same time, Mike Rogers will not have President Trump at the top of the ticket to help drive voter turnout this time around. So I think it'll be very close, but I do think the Democrats are going to win this race by a little bit over 1%. I don't think it's going to exceed more than a 2.5% margin of victory, though. So I do think it goes in the lean Democratic category to start out right now. Next, we're going to go to the state of Georgia. This is Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff. He is up for a very tough re-election in 2026. Ossoff, you may remember, won back in 2020 only by 1.2% in a runoff election, defeating Republican Senator David Perdue. Now, Ossoff has gotten very lucky in the fact he will not have to face off against Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who was ruled out a Senate bid in 2026. Right now, the top candidates are likely going to be U.S. Representative Mike Collins, who could be getting the support of President Trump, or former football coach Derek Dooley, who has the backing of Governor of Georgia Brian Kemp. One of those two are likely going to become the Republican nominee and face off against Jon Ossoff. The main question for here is whether this election is settled on election night or if it will go to a runoff election if no candidate can break 50% of the vote per Georgia election law. At this point in time, I'm currently forecasting that Georgia, no candidate will break 50% on election night and it will go to a runoff. And then once that happens, I think Jon Ossoff is going to win by a little bit over 1 point, again around 1.5% to 2%, similar to what we saw with Herschel Walker in 2022 against Raphael Warnock, where the Democrats end up winning here in the lean Democratic category. Now we have the state of North Carolina. This race is so close and so fascinating. This is Republican incumbent Thom Tillis, who won two very close elections in 2014 and 2020. He is not running for re-election, so it is an open race. The former Democratic governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, is running for Senate this time around for the first time, and he'll be facing off against Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Whatley, who has the backing of President Trump and several Republican U.S. senators. I expect this to be one of the closest, if not the closest, Senate race in the country in 2026. Cooper starts out right now with higher name recognition and higher favorability ratings than Whatley, as North Carolina voters are going to get to know who Whatley is. This race is going to really come down to the wire, as Cooper's election history shows he's a very strong juggernaut candidate in North Carolina at the governor level, whereas North Carolina at the federal level suggests it is more of a lean Republican state. So you're essentially having an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. This is going to be a very, very close race, and I am just very barely giving the edge to Michael Whatley right now in the tilt column. Under half a percentage point is how I see this race going right now. I think this may be something like a 49.5% to 49% victory for Whatley, with a third-party candidate taking about 1% of the vote. I think this race is going to be really, really close, and I could certainly see Roy Cooper winning, and I would not be shocked if in a month from now, when I do my updated predictions for September, if Roy Cooper is winning the Senate race. This is going to be an absolute close one and a really important one to watch. So at this point in time, on the beginning of August for 2025, I currently have the Republicans and Democrats actually keeping the same Senate composition that they currently do. Republicans have 53, Democrats 47. And it'll be interesting to watch Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, New Hampshire, and Maine, because those are going to be the main seats to watch for in terms of if this composition is going to change. Democrats certainly could flip North Carolina, where Republicans have a strong chance at flipping Michigan, and then maybe Georgia or New Hampshire. And Democrats' wild cards are watching on the state of Maine with Susan Collins and how that could all play out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave your comments below. Tell me what you think the Senate map will look like in the 2026 elections and how you think that will all go. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and also hit subscribe as well, so you get notified when I post more videos like this one. I post 3 videos every day that you are not going to want to miss that goes over the latest election news and topics happening in the United States today. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing my updated 2026 governor's elections map prediction for the month of August. Now, there are a lot of governor's races up, with 36 governor's races up in 2026. In today's video, I'm going to go over all the races that are up and give my rankings for how I have them at this current point in time. Now, just to give you an idea of the rankings, I do have the safe ranking, which is the dark red and dark blue colors, as 15 points or more for the Republicans or Democrats. The lighter red and lighter blue color I have as likely, which is in between 15 and 5% margin of victory. The lighter blue and lighter red, these are going to be lean rankings in between 5 and 1% margin of victory. And the super light grayish red and grayish blue color, this is going to be tilt. This is a under 1% margin of victory. So with that said, we have a lot of races to go over, so I'm going to go over the ones I currently have as safe for both the Democrats and for the Republicans. Oregon, Democratic Governor Tina Kotek, I expect to win re-election by a safe Democratic margin. California, Gavin Newsom is term limited. It's going to be a wide open race for who the Democrats and Republicans may put up. There is a jungle primary system in California, which means the top 2 vote getters advance to the general election. We don't know who it's going to be, but whoever the Democratic winner ends up being, I expect will win this election by over 15% of the vote. Could be U.S. Representative or former U.S. Representative Katie Porter, with Kamala Harris now officially not running, but we'll have to wait and see on that. In Hawaii, Democratic Governor Josh Green, I expect to win by more than 15% of the vote. In the state of Colorado, Democratic Governor Jared Polis is term limited, so he cannot run again, but I do expect how Colorado's moved in recent years, and with Senator Michael Bennet running, if he does win, I expect Colorado will be a 15% margin of victory or more for the Democrats in that election. J.B. Pritzker, Democratic Governor of Illinois, it's possible this race could go under 15% of the vote margin of victory. It did in 2022, but 2026, the midterm environment, I'm expecting it to be more of a favorable night for the Democrats than 2022 was. So I think Illinois starts out as safe Democratic. Republicans don't have much of a chance at winning that governor's race in my prediction on this. The state of Maryland, with Democratic Governor Wes Moore, I expect to be a safe Democratic win at this time. Wes Moore is going to win without too much of a problem. Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro. In my last ranking, I had likely Democratic. There is rumblings that Republican Doug Mastriano may be running for this race. Josh Shapiro came very close to winning by a safe margin in 2022. It's possible if another Republican other than Mastriano becomes the nominee, Pennsylvania may be under 15%, but I think Shapiro starts out as a safe Democratic win at this point in time in the state of Pennsylvania. As we move into New England, some of the governor's races actually get interesting. Connecticut is more of a reliable, safe Democratic state, though the governor races do have a history of becoming more competitive than they have been before. Just looking at the governor's race in 2022, in Connecticut, it was about a 12.9% win for Democrat Ned Lamont. So it's possible it could be safe, possible it could be likely. I'm going to start out as safe Democrat right now, but that's an interesting one to watch. Rhode Island's also very interesting as the Democratic governor, Dan McKee, is not very popular according to a lot of early polls. So it's possible he may get primary challenge from the Democratic side. But as for the general election, unless there's a very special case of like an independent candidate running against him, no Republican in the state has a chance of winning. I expect that to be a safe Democratic win. But that's something very interesting to watch for out of Rhode Island, the governor's approval ratings. The state of Massachusetts with Democratic Governor Maura Healey, I fully expect her to run and win by a safe margin of victory. Again, Charlie Baker seems to be the only Republican that can really make Massachusetts competitive, and he's already said he's not running in this race or any elections in 2026. Now for the state of Vermont, this is Republican Governor Phil Scott, who is much more of a moderate liberal Republican on a lot of social issues. I don't believe he's officially said he's running again for re-election in 2026, but the rankings in Vermont are pretty simple. If Phil Scott runs, it will be a safe Republican win. If Phil Scott does not run, it will be a automatic Democratic flip. But for now, assuming Scott runs again, Vermont stays safe for the Republicans. And then that's going to be it for the safe Democratic seats. I just want to go over Vermont while I was up here. Now we have some states that are going to be safe for the Republicans. Idaho will be a safe Republican win, as well as Wyoming. South Dakota's election with Kristi Noem did get competitive a few cycles ago in 2018, but I do think it will be a safe Republican win here. Nebraska's governor election I also expect will be safe Republican, as well as the state of Oklahoma. Alaska could be very interesting as Democratic representative or former representative Mary Peltola is considering a run for governor, Senate, or House. So right now I have Alaska as safe Republican, but if she does decide to enter this race goes down to likely Republican and maybe could even go down to lean. That could become a very competitive race right out of the gate. State of Arkansas with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I expect that will be a safe race. Tennessee, we don't know. I believe it's an open race for governor. We don't know who it's going to be yet. There's some rumblings about Senator Marsha Blackburn and maybe even Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense for President Trump. That news has been going around as well. But regardless, I expect it will be a safe Republican win. Alabama, with Tommy Tuberville running for governor, is going to be safe Republican. South Carolina, the Republican primary is going to be very, very competitive with lots of Republicans running in that race, and Nancy Mace, U.S. Representative, may be joining them as well. But at the general election level, I expect that will be a safe Republican win. In the state of Florida, right now, we have an interesting situation underway where Byron Donalds looks like he'll be the Republican nominee unless Casey DeSantis jumps in the race. She has not officially done so, but if she does, that Republican primary could get very close as well. For right now, though, I'm assuming it will be Byron Donalds, and in that general election, I think Donalds will end up winning by around 15% of the vote. Florida continuing to become more of a safe Republican state as time goes on. And I think that's going to be it for the safe Republican states at this time. That gets the Republicans up to 12. Democrats are at 10. Now we move into the states that I have as likely for the Democrats and for the Republicans in 2026. First, I'm going to start with the state of New Mexico, which I will have starting out in the lean Democratic category. Back in 2022, the Democrat Grisham won by 6.4% against the Republican Mark Ronchetti. And then back in 2018, this race went for Lujan Grisham by about 14.4%. Definitely a much different result, but it was a likely Democratic win in both situations. It will be a new race as Grisham is term limited and cannot run for a third consecutive term. But whoever the Democrat ends up being in that race, I believe 2 Democrats are currently in the race right now, I do expect it will be a likely Democratic win when everything is said and done. In the state of Minnesota, this is Democratic Governor Tim Walz. He is running for re-election in the state of Minnesota. And last time around, he won his governor election by about 7.7% against Republican Scott Jensen. I do believe Jensen has announced he is running again. Back in 2018, Walz won by about 11.4%. I think it's possible that it could reach 2022 numbers of competitiveness. And after being the vice presidential nominee of Kamala Harris, Walz's name has been in the media eye. Sometimes that hurts governor candidates, sometimes it doesn't. We'll have to wait and see how that all goes. But I don't think Walz is going to be in any danger of losing. I think he's going to win by more than 5%, but under 15%, making it a likely Democratic win. Now we have a very interesting one with the state of New York. This is Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul. Her approval ratings earlier on in the year showed she was not in a very good position for re-election. A lot of New Yorkers did not approve of the job she's been doing as governor, so much so that she has a primary challenge from her own Lieutenant Governor, Antonio Delgado, going underway in the state of New York. So that'll be something interesting to watch. The early polling does suggest that Hochul is likely to survive that primary challenge, but that could be something to watch for as well. And on the Republican side, U.S. Representative Elise Stefanik, close ally of President Trump, has expressed interest in running in this race, and it's expected she's going to join the race relatively very soon. Now, for the election results in New York, it actually got pretty competitive in 2022, being a 6.4% win for Hochul over Republican Lee Zeldin. Back in 2018, though, Andrew Cuomo won by 23.4%. So I think New York is going to be a likely Democratic state, but I do think that ends up being Hochul versus Stefanik. I don't know if it reaches the 2022 levels of a 6.4% win, but I do think around 10 points or maybe a little bit shy is where I have it starting out right now. I think New York starts out in the likely Democratic category for Hochul versus Stefanik at this time. Now the last likely win for the Democrats is going to come from the state of Maine, where Democratic Governor Janet Mills is term limited. She cannot run for a third term, so it's an open race. And this is going to be a very interesting one to watch for a few reasons. One, there's a historical precedent in Maine where no party has held the governor's seat for 3 consecutive terms in a row, or if it has not happened for a very long time. So based on that precedent, if the Democrats win, they would be breaking and making history in that regard. Now, there are a lot of Democrats running in this race, including the Secretary of State, Shannon Bellows, son of U.S. Senator Angus King III is running. Troy Jackson, I believe the Maine Senate president, is also running. So there are a lot of Democrats running on that side, including the daughter of the U.S. Representative, Shelley Pingree, is also running. I believe Shanna Pingree is her name. There's a lot going on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, it's also completely wide open on who could be running. I do believe it is the either cousin or nephew of President Bush. I believe his name is Jonathan Bush. Is also considering running in this race. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes in Maine and how that all plays out. It's going to be, I think, a more of an under-the-radar race to watch for in 2026. It was a likely Democratic win back in 2022 against former Governor Paul LePage. Back in 2018, Mills won by a likely Republican or likely Democratic margin against the Republican Moody. So for Maine right now, it's going to be an open race. It's going to be competitive. I do think the Democrats start out as a likely Democratic lead in Maine, but if Bush does become the Republican nominee, obviously the Bush family has a lot of ties to Maine and the Kennebunkport area. It'll be very interesting to see how that all could potentially unfold. That puts the Democrats up to 14 governor's races. Now we have some seats that I currently have as likely for the Republicans. The first seat is going to be in the state of Texas. This is Republican Governor Greg Abbott. He is running for re-election for, I believe, either a 4th or a 5th term. And the Democrats have some potential candidates that could run in this race. We do know Colin Allred's running for Senate, but lots of other Democrats like James Tallarico could run, or Beto O'Rourke, or maybe even other Democratic names. Jasmine Crockett's name has been floated a little bit. There are a lot of Democrats that could run in this race. Greg Abbott won back in 2022 by about 11 points, and he's going to be leading the ticket, which could be competitive if Ken Paxton becomes the Republican nominee for Senate. But I think Greg Abbott wins by more than 5% when everything is said and done, but I don't think he's going to win by more than 15%. So Texas, I have currently starting out in the likely Republican category at this current moment in time. Now we have the state of Ohio. This is going to be an open race as Mike DeWine is term limited and cannot run for a 3rd consecutive term. Republican Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be the Republican nominee. The question is going to be on the Democratic side. Is it going to be Democrat Amy Acton or former Representative Tim Ryan, or does former U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown decide to take a run for governor instead of senator in 2026? his entry into this race would certainly change things up. Right now, I'm currently forecasting Amy Acton versus Vivek Ramaswamy to be the matchup until something changes, and right now, I have that being a over 5% likely Republican win, right around that 7 to 7.5% win for Ramaswamy in this race. Now, I also have a likely Republican win forecasted in the state of New Hampshire, where Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte just got elected for the first time in 2024. New Hampshire, like Vermont, does their governor's races every 2 years. She defeated Democrat Joyce Craig by about 9.3%. And I think she'll probably follow the same playbook of Governor Sununu when he first got elected back in 2016. He won a close race, 2.3%, and then by 2018, he won by a likely Republican margin. Now, Ayotte already started out in the likely Republican margin, but I think it's more likely than not she'll have another win in the likely margin before going to a safe win, running for a third term at that point. New Hampshire, I think, starts out in the likely Republican margin at this point in time. This leads 7 governor's races in Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, Kansas, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Kansas is an interesting state because that is currently represented by Democratic Governor Laura Kelly, but she is term limited and cannot seek another term, and this race is going to be wide open. Now, this race is very fascinating as the Democrats won last time around by 2.2%, but without Laura Kelly leading the top of the ticket, I don't believe the lieutenant governor of Kansas said that that person is going to be running in 2026. Democrats don't really have a strong recruit to carry the mantle that Laura Kelly has had, and I think the Republicans will end up winning this race by a little bit over 5% of the vote. I also saw a report that Republican Attorney General Kurt Kobach would not be running for this race. I think he'd be the only Republican that could really sabotage the GOP's chances in this race. Without him running, the Republicans should win by more than 5% in Kansas. That would be the first flip going from blue to red in 2026. Now we have 6 governor's races remaining, all of which I expect will be decided by under 5% of the vote as of today's current rankings. First, we have the state of Iowa. Now, Iowa is very, very interesting. This is Republican Governor Kim Reynolds. She was eligible to run for a third term, but ultimately decided she is not going to, so this is going to be an open race. Now, I'm going to pull up the page here for Iowa because this is very fascinating. This is going to be a wide-open Republican primary where 3 Republicans are currently running: Eddie Andrews, a state representative; Randy Feenstra, U.S. representative; and Brad Sherman, former state senator, with also Amy Sinclair, the president of the Iowa Senate, expressing interest in running. Now, on the Democratic side, the only statewide elected Democrat currently right now is the Iowa Auditor of State, Rob Sand. And Democrats have been very optimistic about his candidacy as he overperformed many Democrats back in the last time he was on the race, and I believe in 2022. And he is running for this race. This is going to be a very competitive election where Iowa has become a more Republican state at the national level, and Kim Reynolds won by 18.5% in 2022, though her approval ratings now are not very good, which is why part of the reason she decided not to run again. Now, in 2018, Reynolds only won by 2.7% against her Democratic opponent at that time. So I think this race is going to be very close, and Democrats do have a strong opportunity here at potentially flipping this seat, or this governor's race. But I think when everything is said and done, I do think it ends up being Rob Sand versus Randy Feenstra, and I think Feenstra ends up winning by around 4.5% in a much closer race than expected in the state of Iowa, given how it's trended. I do think the Republicans hold on, but I fully expect Rob Sand is going to make a very competitive race out of this one. Now we're going to go to the state of Nevada, where Republican incumbent Governor Joe Lombardo is running for re-election against Democratic Attorney General Aaron Ford. This race could be very interesting because back in 2018, we saw Democrat Steve Sisolak defeat Republican Adam Laxalt by 4.1%. Then, come 2022, we saw Joe Lombardo defeat Steve Sisolak by 1.5%, a likely Republican win, defeating a Democratic incumbent. This time, Lombardo will be the Republican incumbent going up against the Attorney General of the state of Nevada. But this time, it'll be in a Democratic midterm election. Now, Lombardo being the governor gives him a bit of an advantage in this race. However, I do believe I saw a report recently saying Nevada is having a problem with unemployment, and the numbers have risen a lot in the last few years. If that becomes more of a major issue come November of 2026, that could be a very legitimate problem for Lombardo's chances in this election. However, after seeing Nevada trend to the Republican side in 2024, with Donald Trump winning the state by 3.1%, right now a lot of the signs point to Nevada staying in the Republican category, so I'm starting it out as lean Republican for Governor Joe Lombardo at this time. But Nevada is an interesting one that could be tracking come 2026, if those unemployment issues get worse, that it could potentially end up going to the Democrats. But we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. Right now, Lombardo has the advantage. The Republicans are currently at 18, Democrats are at 14. Now we have 4 governor's races left that are all very, very close and very interesting to watch for as well. And I'm going to start with the state of Georgia. Georgia, this is Governor Brian Kemp. He is going to be term limited and cannot seek a 3rd consecutive term. Now, in this governor's race, the Republican side of things right now currently has Attorney General Chris Carr and Lieutenant Governor of Georgia Burt Jones. Those two are more likely than not going to be one of the Republican nominees. Right now, the only poll that's been done was back in 2023 and showed a lot of undecided vote left. I've been forecasting Chris Carr to be the Republican nominee, but we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. The Democrats also have 4 Democrats running, including the former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. A lot of eyes are on Stacey Abrams and former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan as possible Democratic candidates. I fully expect this race is going to be very close. Georgia's been very close in recent years. Kemp won by 7.5% in 2022, but back in 2018, he only won by 1.4%. Where at the Senate level, Georgia has 2 Democratic senators currently representing it. Donald Trump narrowly won the state by 2.2% in 2024. So I think right now, my current prediction is Chris Carr becomes the Republican nominee and faces off against either Keisha Lance Bottoms or maybe Stacey Abrams. But at this current moment in time, I think the Republican wins by around that 1.5% margin that Brian Kemp got in the first time around. It's possible Democrats could win Georgia, but I do think it narrowly starts out as lean Republican. Now we have 2 very interesting races in the Rust Belt in Wisconsin and Michigan. I'll talk about Wisconsin first because this one has a little bit of breaking news since the last time I did a prediction where Democratic Governor Tony Evers is not running for re-election, so it'll be an open race in this election. Currently, the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, Sarah Rodriguez, has declared running for this race. Former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes has expressed interest in running, as well as Cavalier Johnson, the mayor of Milwaukee, and David Crowley, the Milwaukee County executive. This Democratic primary, depending on who runs, could become very interesting and very competitive, especially if Attorney General Josh Kaul throws his name into the ring as well on the Democratic side. The only Democrats we know for sure that aren't running are Tony Evers, Sarah Gillespie, and Tip McGuire. So this is going to be a wide open race on that side. On the Republican side of things, 2 Republicans, Bill Berrien and Josh Schoeman, are currently in this race. All eyes are on U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany from the 7th District as the potential Republican nominee. There has been some speculation recently that U.S. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy could potentially run for this race, as well as Republican Senate nominee Eric Hovde from back in 2024. Now, we do know former Governor Scott Walker has officially ruled out a bid recently, as well as U.S. Senator Ron Johnson and Representative Brian Steele. But this is going to be a very, very close race to watch for in Wisconsin in 2026. President Trump won the state by 0.86% in 2024 at the presidential level after Joe Biden won it by 0.63% in 2020. So the presidential level, it's been very close. The Senate level, Democrat Tammy Baldwin just won by 0.85% in a very close race in 2024. Ron Johnson won by 1 point in 2022 at the Senate level. At the governor level, Tony Evers defeated Tim Michels by 3.4%, in 2022 after 2018, where Evers defeated Scott Walker by 1.1%. Wisconsin has been consistently one of the closest races and closest states in the country at the presidential, Senate, and governor level, and I expect that'll continue once again. Right now, I think the Democrats have a little bit of an edge in this race given the national environment for 2026. It's supposed to be more of a Democratic-friendly night than a Republican night, and Republicans have not seemed to do as well without President Trump at the top of the ticket driving out votes. We also saw that Supreme Court election, but it was not the same election environment as, say, a midterm or of a presidential election, but Democrats were certainly more energized to get out and vote than Republicans were. I think that gives the Democrats a narrow edge, where I'm currently starting Wisconsin out in the tilt category for the Democrats at this point in time. Now we're going to go to the state of Michigan, where Michigan's in a very similar boat to Wisconsin. It is also an open race where Gretchen Whitmer cannot seek a 3rd term. Mike Duggan, the Democratic mayor of Detroit, is running as an independent in this race, and that's throwing a massive wrench in this campaign. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist are running on the Democratic side as the top 2 Democratic candidates. Right now, Republican U.S. Representative John James is leading as the likely Republican nominee at this time, but this race is certainly going to be very close. Early polling from the Glenn Garriff group shows about a 1-point lead for Benson over John James and Mike Duggan in this race with a lot of undecided vote. I think this is going to be one of the closest races in the country as well, and it's really going to depend on how much support Mike Duggan pulls from the Democrats and the Republicans in this race. This is going to be one of the larger third-party vote number percentages if Duggan does stay in through the election. Again, given the election environment without Donald Trump at the top of the ticket to help out, I do think the Democrats very narrowly hold on to the Michigan governor's race here by under 1 point, and I think Mike Duggan splits a lot of vote in this race, where if he were not in this race, I think the Democrats would probably be winning by a lean Democratic category, but putting it as still a Democrat gives the Republicans a better chance at winning. And this is at the governor level, where Gretchen Whitmer's won in 2018 by a likely Democratic margin, and in 2022 in a likely Democratic margin. But at the presidential level, Trump just won Michigan by 1.4. The Senate race only went to the Democrat Slotkin by a tilt margin in 2024. So I'm starting it out as tilt Democratic, but that's also a very close one to watch. And now it all comes down to the state of Arizona, where this is going to be Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. And what I've previously called the closest election in the United States, I think it very well still could be in 2026. Katie Hobbs has filed or expressed interest in running again, and I fully expect that she will. Andy Biggs, the U.S. Representative, and Karen Taylor Robson are the two leading Republicans, both having the co-endorsement of President Trump to be the Republican nominees. Now, the early rankings for this race obviously are a toss-up, and the early polling shows a very tight competitive race with a lot of undecided vote, with Katie Hobbs getting around a 2% lead in the most recent poll. One back in April showed about a 4% lead, and one before that showed about a 2% lead for Hobbs versus Andy Biggs. For Karen Taylor Robson, it was also a 2% lead. For the one back before that, it was about 8%. So this is going to be a very interesting race. The early polling shows Hobbs with a very narrow lead. How it all comes by election day, we'll have to wait and see, as Arizona did swing a little bit back towards President Trump in 2024, where Trump won the state by 5.5%, even though he lost it in 2020 by 0.3%. At the Senate level, it's currently represented by two Democrats, though, where Democrat Ruben Gallego won against Kari Lake by 2.4%. In 2022, Mark Kelly won by 4.9%. And again, I got to remind you of that governor's race back in 2022. Katie Hobbs only defeated Kari Lake by 0.67%. So this is going to be a very close race. Very interesting to see how this one is going to go. I'm currently having it start out as tilt Democrat right now, under 1 point. As Arizona, I fully expect to be one of the closest races in the country. Past predictions, I believe back in April or May, I had it in the tilt Republican column. I flipped it, I believe, in June to tilt Democrat, and I'm keeping it in tilt Democrat for now until I see anything different or changing in this race, because this is going to be a very close race, but I do think the Democrats nearly start out with the advantage in this one. So with this, I have the Republicans holding 19 governor seats, Democrats 17, with some very close races in Nevada, Arizona, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and in Georgia. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below telling me what you think of the 2026 governor elections, what your map would look like, and who you think are going to win these respective races. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and hit subscribe, as I post 3 new videos every day that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at the 2026 House elections, and for the month of August, I'm giving my up-to-date House prediction for the 2026 elections. Now, this video, I'm first going to go through the 2026 House map as it's currently done, going from the 2024 elections, and make my current prediction based on this current map. Then after I do this, I am going to talk about the potential redistricting going on the House map and how that could change things going into the 2026 elections. So if you're unfamiliar, the current House composition is Republicans hold 220 House seats, Democrats 215 after the 2024 elections. And just to give you an idea, the Republicans won 50.6% of the nationwide House vote, Democrats won 47.8%, meaning Republicans won by 2.8% at the national House level. And this is a very important distinction to note here as you go through these states, because the generic ballot currently at this point in time is roughly Democrat plus 2.9 were the early averages. So I actually can use on the website map.jacksonjude.com where you can actually edit the margins to show you what a margin based on the 2024 results could look like. So the Republicans, won by 2.8%. So going from 2.8 to 2.9 for the Democrats, well, that would be essentially about a 4.1% shift towards the Democrats. So we're going to do that. We're going to shift the House map by about 4.1%. Now, obviously, it may not go 100% this way, as each election could be different, and if the results are drawn differently, then we'll go from there. But the Democrats, based on this result, will end up going from 229 to 206 for the Republicans. Now, for my own personal predictions for this race, I think Maine 2nd District could be very interesting. Jared Golden's going to be in for a very tough fight versus the Republican former Governor Paul LePage. But first, we're going to just go state by state and just do it this way. Alabama, nothing changes. Alaska, I think the Republicans hold on and win there. Arizona, very close districts in the 1st and 6th district. Now, based on the current shift map, that should be red. I'm sorry, I can't zoom in on it, so I'll have to just do this to zoom in. Arizona, based on these current rankings on past results, goes for these two districts shifting towards the Democratic side based on that point percentage shift on the 2024 map. Now, my past prediction, I did have these ones narrowly being in the Republican category, but if the Democrats are winning by very narrow margins, then we're going to do that. We're going to shift them Arizona 1 and Arizona 6 with Juan Ciscomani. We're both going to give these to the Democrats in very close under 1% margins. That gets the Democrats up to 208. Arkansas will stay the way it is. California is going to be really interesting because you have some close races in California 13 with Adam Gray and California 45 as well with Derek Tran. Now, these races barely flipped in 2024, but these races are expected to stay with the Democrats in this election environment if the Democrats are doing better in the House overall vote. So in this one, Adam Gray would stay in the Democratic side, and California 45 would likely stay in the Democratic side as well. And just to ensure I'm not missing anything, it would look like that. Now, California could be very interesting as the prospect of redistricting is brought up. Gavin Newsom has threatened to redistrict California if Texas and Ohio redistrict. Now, there is more of a legal hurdle Democrats have to go through in California to do so, but that could be a very interesting prospect to see how some of these closer Republican districts, like this district, California 41 or California 22, could potentially be redrawn into more Democratic favorable districts. Now, Colorado has some very close races here with Colorado 8. Specifically, Gabe Evans barely won back in 2024, and this new composition change to this district actually flips to the Democrats based on the 2024 results. So we're going to give the Democrats this win here, or this district, by a very narrow margin. We'd also likely see the 3rd district, which was a likely Republican win, probably go down into the lean Republican category. Connecticut, everything would pretty much remain the same. Delaware would remain the same. Florida, nothing really changes, I don't think, in terms of the 2026 map right now. The results may change a little bit in some of these counties, but nothing really gets too drastic on that. Georgia remains the same. Hawaii the same. Idaho the same. Illinois, I don't think there's any really competitive districts here at the general election level. That'll remain the same. Indiana will probably remain the same. If anything, Indiana's one district may get a little bit more blue in this scenario. Iowa is going to be very, very interesting because Iowa has two very close districts with Marionette Miller Meeks in Iowa 1 and Zach Nunn in Iowa 3. Now, based on the map shift feature, these both districts end up going blue in this scenario. Now, Marionette Miller Meeks only barely won in 2024 by less than, I believe, 1% of the vote. So it was a very close race. I think it's very possible we see her lose in 2026, even if the shift towards the Democrats isn't that drastic. But Iowa 3, going for the Democrats, is a little bit more of a bold statement. But the last time the Democrats won the House vote, this district did go for the Democrats. So based off the current numbers, Iowa 3 would flip for the Dems. Kansas would pretty much remain the way that it is. Kentucky would probably remain the same. It's possible Andy Barr's seat, the 6th district, gets more competitive, but again, I think he'd probably hold on, or the Republican that runs there would hold on and win there. Louisiana remains the same. Maine 2nd district, the margins would suggest that Jared Golden should defeat Paul LePage, based on the electoral shift in precedent, but the early polling shows a very close race for Golden versus LePage, where I think LePage actually may end up winning this race in the very Republican Maine 2nd District. Right now, narrowly putting it until Democrat, but I do think that one could potentially go toward the Republicans. Not a done deal, but it certainly could be. Maryland, I don't think changes unless they try and redistrict. Here, Massachusetts, same thing. Michigan's going to be interesting because Michigan 7 with Tom Barrett is one of the Democrats' top targets in 2026, as well as Michigan 10 with John James. Based on those shift rankings, Michigan 7 does end up going Democratic, but Michigan 10 does not. So we'll assign those, and that would give the Democrats up to 215. Michigan 10 staying Republican, Republicans at 208. Minnesota would remain pretty much the same, other than the 2nd District with Angie Craig getting a little bit more Democratic. Mississippi stays unchanged. Missouri, it really depends on if they try and redraw the districts here. That could get more competitive. Montana remains the same. Nebraska, the 2nd District with Don Bacon, now the Republican representative is not running again, almost going to be guaranteed a Democratic flip, and the margins will likely be a lot stronger here in the likely Democratic category in this scenario. Nevada, things I think stay unchanged there. New Hampshire, both seats I think will remain Democratic in this scenario. New Jersey, Tom Keene's district could be something very close to watch for in this race, as in the current House feature, Tom Keene would still narrowly hold on here, but this is a seat the Democrats are watching very closely. That one barely stays in the Republican category. New Mexico, 2nd District with Democrat Gabriel Vasquez. In this scenario, it would remain Democratic, getting them to 216. Now, New York, some close races as well, including New York 4, but that one ends up staying blue in this scenario. New York 17 with Mike Lawler very barely stays in the red category on that one. And I don't believe I'm missing any. Go to North Carolina. Democrat Don Davis would hold on and win there. North Dakota at large would stay red. Ohio, now based on the current composition of Ohio, these 3 districts, the 9th, the 1, and the 13 would all remain Democratic. But these could potentially be getting redrawn, and I'll go into that in just one moment. Oklahoma stays red. Oregon stays the way it is. Pennsylvania, some very close races here. Based on the 2024 results, all 3 of these close races actually flip towards the Democratic side, with Pennsylvania 8 with Rob Bresnahan, Pennsylvania 7 with Ryan McKenzie, and Pennsylvania 10 with Scott Perry, all flipping to the Democrats based on the 2024 results. Rhode Island stays the same, South Carolina stays the same, South Dakota the same, Tennessee the same. Texas, before redistricting, probably all staying the same, in Texas 34, staying in the Democratic side. Utah remains, Vermont at large, Virginia, the 2nd District, this is going to be Republican Jen Kiggins. This district very narrowly flips to the Democrats based on the 2024 results and the shift on this one. Then we have Washington, where the 3rd District, Maria Perez, would also win that one. West Virginia would remain as is. And then we have the state of Wisconsin with the 3rd District with Derek Van Orden. This one, based on the 2024 results, would narrowly shift and go towards the Democrats. So based on that, the current results would essentially be the Democrats at 227 House seats. Republicans would be at 208 based on the current generic ballot numbers for the Real Clear Politics polling average for 2026. Now, it's important to note, obviously, we're in August of 2026. We don't know what the generic ballot's going to be looking like come November 2026, if the polls are even correct, if everything translates, how the country is doing, how the economy is doing, how President Trump and the Republicans are viewed. These are very wild questions that are left up for grabs. But right now, based on the current generic ballot numbers, the Democrats are on track to win the House for, I believe, the first time since not that long ago, actually. I think they had it in 2020, and the Republicans won it back in 2022. So it hasn't been that long, but if the Democrats do this, they win back the House, they get 227 House seats, Republicans get 208. And this is why Republicans are having the conversation about redistricting in a lot of states, because they know the writing on the wall right now is based on the current House map. Republicans are probably not going to hold a majority if everything goes the way the current polling suggests that it will. So first we'll look at the state of Ohio, as this is one of the first states that was mentioned. Ohio, at very least, if Republicans redistrict, they're hoping to get more House seats out of the 1st District, out of the 9th and the 13th, flipping to the Republican side. The Republicans could try and gerrymander around Ohio 3 and Ohio 11 and get these areas, but I think they end up staying on the Democratic side. But either way, that gets the Democrats down 3 seats, 224. Republicans are at 211. So that cuts into the Democrats' margin a little bit. Now, Republicans and President Trump specifically have also made a note about the state of Florida. Florida, Ron DeSantis has teased potential redistricting as well and trying to get some seats out of Florida, maybe trying to net an extra 5 or so seats in Florida. The first targets I think Republicans would seek to eliminate are probably the 9th District in Florida 9 with Darren Soto and definitely Jared Moskowitz District in Florida 23. Now, those two would be probably the most likely Republican targets. Republicans could try and go after some of these more solid Democratic seats, but again, that would be probably very tough and may put some other Republicans potentially in danger of losing. But what if Republicans net 2 out of Florida just on that alone? Well, that gets the Republicans at 213, Democrats are at 222. Now we go to the state of Texas. Texas has been getting a lot of talk, and they've been really reigniting the conversations of redistricting. 2 Republican targets right away are Texas 34 with Vicente Gonzalez and Texas 28 with Henry Cuellar. Those are some seats the Republicans certainly want to target. Now, that's only 2 seats right there, but they do make a very significant impact. Republicans say they want to try and get an extra 5 House seats out of the state of Texas. It's going to be very tough to do, though, as the Dallas area is all pretty strong Democratic. The Houston area is also very strong Democratic as well. And Central Texas around Austin is also very Democratic. So Republicans could try and get those, but I feel like that's going to be very tough. You would need a really radical gerrymander in that regard to do that. But even if the Republicans do that, they get Ohio, Texas, and Florida at a very conservative estimate. That gets them closer, but Democrats still hold the majority at 220. Republicans are at 215. But the Republicans are also targeting, potentially, the state of Missouri, where the Democrats currently hold 2 House districts in the 5th and the 1st District. Maybe the Republicans try and redistrict and gerrymander these seats and get rid of these 2 Democratic wins. Well, if they could do that, that would get the Democrats at 218, Republicans at 217. So with very big redistricting in Missouri and pretty considerable redistricting in Texas, Florida, and Ohio, that would get it within a 1-seat House majority for the Democrats based on the current generic ballot polling for 2026, which essentially means if the generic ballot ends up underestimating the Democrats or being lower for the Democrats than it is right now, the Republicans may be able to hold the House by 1 or 2 seats if the gerrymandering goes 100% their way. Now, that is a big if, because the Republicans aren't going to just redistrict all these maps, and the Democrats aren't just going to have anything to say about it. As I mentioned, California Governor Gavin Newsom has threatened to redistrict his map as well to try and stop the Republicans from doing it in Texas and in Ohio. Now, what could that look like? Well, immediately 2 districts come to mind that are very competitive, and the 22nd with David Valadao, and 41 with Ken Calvert, and another one, California 40 with Young Kim. If the Democrats redistrict here and they can draw out these seats, that would get California and the Democrats back up to 221 to the Republicans 214. Now, could Democrats try and radically redraw and get California's 3rd district as well? But just sticking with that right now, that would get the Democrats up another handful of seats. Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul in New York has also expressed interest in trying to redraw the map and gerrymander the map to combat the Republicans here. And New York could have some very considerable gains here. First one I'm watching is Mike Lawler's district in New York 17. That's already a top target for the Democrats. I'm sure Democrats would love to try and redistrict that one out. Maybe New York 1 with Nicholas LaLauda could potentially be a target as well. That one's a little bit more of a stretch than New York 17 is, but maybe Democrats are able to draw that one out as well. That would get Democrats up to 223, Republicans 212. And the state of Maryland, where there's only 1 Republican House seat in the 1st District, if the map is drawn in a certain way, it is possible Democrats could get that seat as well. So even if Republicans redistrict and gerrymander the maps in Texas, in Ohio, in Florida, and in Missouri, and that gets them within getting close to the majority, the Democrats, if they can get the legal process to play out, could come back and also gerrymander in California, in New York, and in, I'm totally blanking, I'm sorry, California, New York, and Maryland. That could give the Democrats an extra few seats and essentially negate the changes made by the Republicans. So this is all a very fascinating conversation. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens. Ohio and Texas, I do believe, have laws in the books that do allow for a mid-decade redistrict, whereas California and New York, I don't believe do. The governors would have to call for a special section of the legislature to do that, and I'm not sure if the state Supreme Courts would step in and allow this or not allow this, but this is all a very big conversation happening in political circles, this topic of redistricting, and putting it bluntly, if you're not 100% like kept up with all the politics and elections, it probably seems like a very convoluted and confusing mess. And I've been trying to keep up with it as much as possible, and even I think it's kind of a bit of a confusing mess. So we'll have to wait and see how it all goes. As any news breaks on these maps and such, I will, of course, be doing videos and trying to keep you updated as much as possible. But there's real potential here that the redistricting process, if there is any, come 2026, to get really complicated and really messy. At the core fundamental levels of it, based on the 2024 U.S. House map, assuming nothing changes, and the current generic ballot numbers right now, I would say it's more likely than not the Democrats win back the House come 2026, keeping on track the way parties not in charge usually do in the midterm elections, especially factoring in it will be the midterm election in the president's second term. Then usually the off-year party does very well, like Republicans did in 2014. In that midterm, like Democrats did in 2006, the off party usually does very well in the president's second midterm. So from that standpoint alone, the Democrats should probably win back the House. Even if it's only by like 3 or 4 seats, the Democrats should have enough to win back the House. But if the Democrats don't gerrymander or redistrict their maps at all, and the Republicans are able to redistrict and gerrymander in Texas, Ohio, Florida, and maybe Missouri, the Republicans may have a very narrow path in doing that point where they'd be essentially changing around 10 to 15 House seats. They would then have a credible path to potentially holding on to the House majority. But again, if the Republicans did that, I don't think the Democrats would just let that happen without trying to redistrict their own maps to try and stop the Republicans from getting the majority that way. So it's all a convoluted mess. There's going to be a lot of legal questions and probably states and state parties suing each other over whether or not this is allowed, whether this is constitutional. And to be completely honest with you, I really don't know how this is all going to play out, which states can do it, which states can't, if any can do it or if any can't. We'll have to wait and see how this all goes. It's going to be a very messy process. But as of today, I think the Democrats are more likely than not going to keep the House if no redistricting happens. If redistricting happens, everything's kind of out the window, and we have to wait and see how the new maps are redrawn, because that could have a very drastic impact on which party holds the House come 2026. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. If you did, make sure to leave a comment below telling me what you think of this video and who you think is going to win the House come 2026 and what your thoughts are on the redistricting and how that could all go come 2026. Also, if you have anything I talked about in this video that you're confused on, you have any questions, you want more clarity from me, or if you have anything you want to add to anything I've said in this video, please feel free to leave it down below. I always check out the comments, so certainly I'll be reading everything you leave down there. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe, as I post 3 new videos every day that you're not going to want to miss. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.